Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Wild Romance, Mating in the Animal Kingdom, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader Adrianna Chabot. Adrianna is a zoologist turned expedition guide who combines serious scientific knowledge with a natural gift for storytelling. She's led expeditions across the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and Moab, and adventured everywhere from Spain's Camino de Santiago to Australia and Morocco, bringing that same spirit of discovery to every trip she guides. Adrianna, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. The show is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to get to share a little bit of wild romance with you all since it is Valentine's Day month. And so I thought I'd show you guys on how different species interact with each other in different forms of mating scenarios. And so I'll kind of get right into it. What we're first going to discuss is asexual versus sexual selection in order to get a broad view of what this is going to look like. We'll talk about polygamy, monogamy, some courtship displays, and then outliers as well. I do want to state that some of the things that we are going to talk about are seen as controversial and people. I'm not here to talk about people. What has been reported, recorded, and documented in the animal kingdom is what I'm going to be talking about today. So I don't usually include a picture of my partner, but I thought it was appropriate if we're going to be talking about love in the animal kingdom. This is my love. His name is Chandler. We currently live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we go hiking and rock climbing all the time. We have a cat and a dog, so it's quite an adventure here. I grew up in Southern California, where I spent a lot of time up in the Sierra Nevadas with both my parents, and then a little bit of time in Bozeman, Montana as well. My father moved out there. So I've just gotten to really dive into adventure in a lot of different forms. I went to school in Humboldt State University, which is Northern California. It's quite a small little school. But while I was there, I got a degree in zoology and just fell in love with wildlife and botany so much more than I ever did before. Since then, I've lived all over the California coast. I've lived in Oregon, Washington, a little bit in Minnesota, a little bit in Australia, and then here and there in Idaho, and now been pretty settled down in Utah for a while. I chose this topic because I'm absolutely fascinated with animal behavior, and you can't really fully understand the picture and when you're watching animals interact with each other unless you understand their courtship and their mating behaviors. So getting into the nitty-gritty, we're going to talk about a little bit about sexual reproduction versus asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is near and dear to us all, and this is when there are two parents that contribute their genetic material through fertilization in order to create offspring. Whereas asexual reproduction is where one individual is splitting, budding, or cloning themselves to create more individuals. One example of this is the classic scientific science book example of binary fission in amoebas, where one individual will split off and become two. If you've ever propagated your houseplants, you have assisted them in doing asexual reproduction. Those are genetically identical from the parent plant. And then the individual I'm the most excited to talk about in this whole presentation is honestly this tiny little fish here. She is called the Amazon Molly, and I call her she because the only gender in this species is female. So these individuals only reproduce asexually. They do require a male for copulation in order to stimulate the fertilization process, but the sperm from that male will never actually reach the embryo. It'll be killed off in the body. And that this allows for the trigger to occur. And then she'll do this really amazing thing that is also fairly uncommon in fish. And she'll give live birth to exact clones of herself. Now, if you have any idea how absolutely fascinating that is, you're probably wondering, well, how is this species able to continuously exist? it's thought that they just have a really robust genetic system within them and an ecosystem that isn't changing a whole lot. There's about 500,000 generations that have been existing since their discovery, and so they're doing great. I'm going to go into now individuals that can reproduce sexually and asexually. We're going to discuss the flatworm, which if you've watched my other presentation on parasites, you'll know that I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for flatworms, and that's because they are just so crazy weird. So you can see in the little square pink box on the left-hand side where I have outlined the reproductive parts of a flatworm. If you're looking at that, you can see that they have both a penis and ovary, which allows them to do what's called traumatic insemination. And traumatic insemination occurs when the flatworm cannot find another individual of their species. They will actually take their barbed penis and stab themselves in the head in order to self-inseminate and allow for another generation to occur. They are also able to do a thing called penis fencing. So the idea is that the genetic or the energy cost of reproducing is very high. And so if you can duel in order to stab another individual with your semen, then you can make it so that they carry the high energy cost of having to reproduce. These guys also have amazing regenerative processes that are often studied in science. So you could chop this guy up into 3 different pieces, and each one of those pieces would turn into an exact copy of that individual. So they're really fascinating. Our next example is strawberries, though they're not the only ones that perform this type of reproduction. So we all know that strawberries can produce tasty little fruits that have seeds on them that will help propagate them, and that is their form of sexual reproduction. But the way that they're also able to do asexual reproduction is if you see these little red lines going through on the ground, those are actually called runners. And those runners send out a clone, an exact clone of the parent, and allows them to dig roots into the soil and reproduce that way. Aspens and several other species of plants also have this method of reproduction. It's quite effective. Another one that we have is the Komodo dragon. So Komodo dragons can produce sexually and lay eggs, though if they find themselves without a mate anywhere near them, they can produce asexually when isolated. When they do reproduce asexually, they produce only males. And so this can be really helpful in establishing populations on islands and in isolated areas. Our next one is sexual selection. I'm not going to go crazy in depth into this. This is very near and dear to us. We're all very familiar with how sexual reproduction occurs. But these are just some really cute, pretty pictures to look at as a demonstration of that. We're now going to dig into polygamy and monogamy. Often we think of just these two umbrella terms for reproduction, though, as I said, they're just umbrella terms. There's a lot of finite information that goes into each one of these categories. I also want to say that reproduction is an extremely vast and large topic to be covering. And unfortunately, in the 45 minutes I have to get to talk to you guys, I just can't cover it all. But I'm going to do my best, and I hope that you really enjoy the examples I'm going to share with you. So we have first polygamy. When I see really big words like polygamy, I really like to dissect them down. So poly, we're all familiar with probably, is that poly means many, and then gamy can be to unite, to wed, to reproduce with. And so when we look at polygyny, polyandry, and polygynandry, we're going to break those down as we go as well. So let's start off with polygyny. So polygyny is one male for multiple females. And we're using another really classic example of the red-winged blackbird. So these individuals are found throughout the Americas, the present mostly in marshy or wetland territories. And these males will come in, they'll set up territory boundaries in defendable areas. And what they're doing when they come in and set up these territory boundaries is they are actually looking for resources such as food, water, and good nesting grounds. Now they have this really important spot on their shoulder, which is a very key identifier of them. And it's called an epaulet, or as I'll also refer to it as a red shoulder patch. So this is a really good indicator of testosterone. And scientists have done research where if they are diluting that color down with some dye, they're seeing that those individuals that have that color patch diluted, they're less likely to maintain good nesting territories. They're not as able to win fights, and they're less likely to reproduce. The other thing is when they have cut the feathers away, because they are able to use some of the top black feathers to kind of cover that up. When they've cut those feathers away to keep that patch fully exposed the entire time, it showed that these individuals were coming into more conflict and were having a lot more energy cost and having to defend territories and confront other competitive males than the individuals that were able to just cover it back up. So there is a cost benefit. It does show how much testosterone is within an individual. And so when a female comes in, she's looking at that color patch. She's seeing how the testosterone, how reproductively strong that individual is. She's also scoping out the territory and seeing if she likes his mating display. They still do a little dance and sing a little song. And if she does decide that she likes that territory or likes that individual, she'll mate with him and rear the chicks alone. So I do also want to say that this does not mean that that female is loyal to that male. Oftentimes there will be extra pair copulations that go on where she will mate with the neighboring or rival males. And the reason she does this is to increase the genetic diversity or the robustness of the DNA that's going into her offspring and hoping to give them the best chance of survival. Now, the next example that we'll go into is polyandry. Poly meaning one female to multiple males. And so in this example, we have the spotted sandpiper. Now, the spotted sandpiper is interesting in the sandpiper family because they are nesting in primarily more temperate zones, where others of that species will be going into more Arctic areas where the breeding season is a bit shorter. So in this case, the female is the first to arrive. She's larger and more aggressive. She'll set up those same territory boundaries, looking for the same resources as that red-winged blackbird does. She can mate with up to 5 males, and during that season, she will mate with the individual that does select her. So in this case, the male is doing the selecting. She'll mate with that individual, they'll build a nest together, she'll lay her eggs, and then she will go on and find another mate. The only time she typically hangs around is for the last mate of the season. So say she's on her 5th mate, she'll hang out and help to incubate the eggs and help rear them. And then our last one is polygynandry. I always kind of stumble over that word, but we have an example of acorn woodpeckers. So these guys are present in areas such as Washington, Oregon, and California. They're quite charismatic little birds, and you can hear them quite well if you're within the forests of any of those areas. So they live in cooperative family groups where the main nesting sites are old growth granary trees. So acorn woodpeckers, as you probably guessed, primarily feed off of acorns. They dig perfect cavities into these old trees that have a really thick bark layer. They'll put the acorn in there and then it allows them to store it. So these trees are a finite resource. There's not a high abundance of them. And in order to deal with the finite resource, they did cooperative breeding. And so in these groups, you'll have from 1 to 7 males and 1 to 4 females. And every single male will mate with every single female, and every single individual within that cooperative group will actually help to rear the young. So there's an extremely high survival rate for these individuals' offspring. The other interesting thing is that the offspring from the previous year will also help to rear the young. So it's really fascinating. The only kind of aggression that does occur is if one of the females is laying eggs earlier than any of the other females, the other females will actually kill that egg or kick it out of the nest. And so makes the other female keep laying eggs until she's synced up with the entire group. Here are some other examples of different forms of polygamy within the animal kingdom. We have honeybees that display polyandry. So the one female, she'll go out on her mating flight and she'll mate with about 10 to 20 male drones. She'll store that sperm, and for the next 3 to 5 years of her life, she'll use those to help reproduce and create the hive. Another common example is lions. They display polygamy, where one male or couple males are mating with a pride of females. Bonobos display polygynandry, where they're kind of mating with everyone. Bonobos are really well known in the animal kingdom for being quite promiscuous. They use sex to help relieve stress, to form alliances, negotiate hierarchy, and resolve any conflict that is occurring. Pipefish are known as polyandrous, where one female is mating with multiple males. They'll kind of do a courtship dance, they'll mate, and then the female will actually lay her eggs on the male, and he will carry those eggs until they do hatch. We have elk, and as was mentioned, I guide in Yellowstone. So if you ever come to our fall Yellowstone trips, I hope that you have the amazing opportunity to be able to hear and see this type of interaction. So in this one, you can see that there is a bull elk to the right. You can see him with a big, beautiful rack, and then he's got his harem over to the left. And so what he's going to do for the entire rutting season is he is going to do everything in his power to keep those females together, keep them away from any other males, and breed with them continuously in order for them to sire his offspring. He does this so much that he doesn't even eat. So it's really fascinating. The bugle is really amazing to get to hear. And then I kind of just included this small hive beetle because these beetles are found in the honeybee hives, and they are polygynandria. So they are mating with any individual that they come across that is the opposite sex. So what are the advantages of polygamy? I think it's pretty clear. We're looking at the greater options for reproductive success. In talking about this, we're going to primarily talk about when there is polygamy, where there's one male for multiple females. So males are able to reproduce with multiple offspring, and females are able to select the territories. They're able to avoid males that may be infertile. And so they are putting more cost into rearing, but they don't have to worry about food and water and resources quite as much. Moving on to monogamy, or you'll also hear me refer to it as social monogamy. So social monogamy is broken into these different categories where we have serial monogamy, lifelong monogamy, and then sort of a subcategory that goes into both of these is genetic monogamy. So when we look at serial monogamy, I'm using fairy wrens. They are native to Australia, and they're these just tiny, cute birds that fly around. So the males will attract the females, and the female will select the mate that she wants for the season. The male has to perform really high mate guarding displays. And this is because the female is quite promiscuous. So if he is not paying attention, she is actually going to go off and cheat. The reason she does this is, again, she wants to increase the genetic diversity of her offspring and create really a robust DNA. The other benefit of this is that the individual that she mates with will actually help to rear the young. So sometimes she'll have two males helping to feed the offspring, and that is just great for her. What the male will also do, other than regular mate guarding, is he will do what's called the cloacal kiss or the cloacal poke. If you're not familiar with bird anatomy, birds have one hole to rule it all. They have one hole for defecating, one hole for reproduction, including egg laying. And so he will go up, he'll poke her cloaca, hopefully pulling out that rival male semen, and then he will then mate with her, hopefully ensuring that it's only his offspring that are about to be reproduced. Moving on, we have lifelong monogamy. And for lifelong monogamy, it means mating between two individuals for a lifetime. Oh, I forgot to say, serial monogamy is mating between two individuals for a season. So supposedly monogamous for that season, though we saw that there is cheating that occurs. So lifelong monogamy is mating between two individuals for a lifetime. This is a little bit more familiar to us in our terms of how we form our partnerships typically. So we have the macaroni penguin, and you did hear me right. They are called macaroni penguins, and there's a really fascinating story behind that, and you can go ahead and check it out. I just don't have time to cover it. But they will mate, and once they do that and selected their pairs, they'll join back together every season. And one of the benefits of this is because their nesting grounds are on Antarctic islands, and so they have these extremely short nesting periods. And if you know who you're going to nest with for that season, it makes everything just that much quicker, and you have to expend less energy. So the males arrive first, and when the females do arrive, there will be a courtship display to help increase those bonds and connectivity, and then they will actually lay eggs. There isn't really a whole lot of room for cheating that can go on. These islands are really small and compact with up to 10 to 100,000 individuals. So cheating is really hard to get away with, as well as there's still very strong mate guarding. So these individuals show genetic monogamy as well, where the offspring are only related to the two parents. Talking about genetic monogamy is defined as all offspring are from the single male-female pair. So in discussing emperor penguins are considered serial monogamous, just like our fairy wren are. So they join together for a season, and every season they're going to select a new mate. So the male and female will join together. The female will lay the egg, and while the male is incubating it, she will go back off to the ocean, and she'll eat as much as she can for about 65 days before returning when the egg hatches. Once the egg hatches, both parents are going to be helped with chick rearing and the hope of survival. Promiscuity is pretty rare, and this is because they are, again, just in such tight quarters. And so you have a really high increase of genetic monogamy. I want to say that lifelong monogamy, as we think of it, is very uncommon. Only about 10% of mammal species mate exclusively with one another, whereas in the avian area, we see approximately 90% of birds can form lifelong pairs, which is kind of cool. This is just a helpful example if you got a little bit confused between the social, genetic, and different forms of monogamy. So the social monogamy, you can see on the left, 2 pairs of finches. There's an extra pair copulation occurring on the right, and then you have your other 2 at the bottom that are only mating with each other. Those ones are genetically monogamous, whereas the other ones are potentially not. So some more examples of monogamy in the animal kingdom. This is my photo to the left of these 2 ravens. If you've ever been on a tour with me, you know how near and dear these birds are to my heart. I just think they're incredibly intelligent and fun to watch. And so they do form lifelong pair bonds, and they are genetically monogamous. Extra pair copulations are quite rare. They usually stay together, and they rarely divorce, which is quite cute. The next one is our albatross, which is down on the bottom. They form lifelong pair bonds, and in some rare and extreme occurrences, when a mate is lost, that individual that has survived will actually not form another pair bond. So they can be so exceedingly loyal that they will just stop reproducing if their mate is gone. Our next example is gibbons, which are the 2 primates at the bottom. Gibbons are socially monogamous primates forming long-term exclusive pair bonds to raise offspring, and there's very rarely extra pair copulations and very rare forms of cheating that occur, or divorce that occur. Our next one is seahorses. They are serial monogamous, and some species do form lifelong pair bonds. And then the shingleback skink. which I think looks like a pine cone. I think they're just really cute. They do form lifelong monogamous pair bonds and come back to each other every year, which I think is just really fascinating for the animal kingdom. What are the advantages of monogamy? You have the reduction of competition between the sexes. As I said, you don't have to worry about who you're going to mate with for that season. You kind of figure it out pretty quick. Once a mate is selected, the energy and attention can be focused on child rearing, so a little bit less mate guarding for some of these individuals. Then you have the increased survival. So 2 parents are better than 1. It's no longer a game in terms of how many individuals can you copulate with, but how many offspring can you get into adulthood. So monogamy versus polygamy. Why did these 2 forms potentially evolve? So these are still very thought about in the world of science, and they're still very much discussed. So there's no extremely clear definition. In the world of biology, there's nothing that's black and white. There's always shades of gray and always exceptions to the rule. So monogamy is thought to have evolved when males cannot defend access to more than 1 female. And this occurs when territories are large, resources such as food and water are widely distributed, and then females are spatially dispersed. So essentially saying that the energy cost of locating and guarding multiple males is not worth the reward. And so selecting a single mate is more favorable for their energy. The other interesting thing is that parental care often follows monogamy and it does not cause it. All to say is that the chance of survival for monogamous pairs is a byproduct, an extra bonus byproduct of monogamy, but it was not the thought of reason of why monogamy would have evolved. And then polygamy is thought to have evolved when individuals are highly clustered. So either you're male or you're female. We'll go again from that polygamy example where females are highly clustered, resources are defensible, and then a single individual can control access to multiple mates, such as that red-winged blackbird in a very dense location where multiple females and food and water and all of that can be protected. Okay, we are going to go into courtship displays, which is always quite fun. There's a lot of individuals that show just really unique examples. I only chose a few so that we can fit it into our finite time together. And I'll admit the few that I did choose were based off of the people in my life. So we are currently looking at the satin bowerbird. The satin bowerbird is my partner Chandler's favorite all-time bird, and that's because they collect blue objects. So they compulsively collect blue objects from berries, flowers, feathers, shells, plastic bits, bottle caps, and even pen lids. And they'll organize them in this bower, which is what that individual, this is a male. The females are a bit more drab, which is typical in the bird world. And so he's got this bower and he wants everything to be perfectly displayed in the right size and the right shape, so that when the female arrives and she looks at him through his bower while he's doing his dance and singing his song, that she is impressed. If she's not impressed, she'll fly away. If she is impressed, then she'll hang tight. They'll mate at the bower. She'll fly off, create her own nest, and she'll rear chicks by herself. There is some pretty intense competition that can occur within this. So rival males will come in, they'll steal objects, they'll trash the place. If it's not a clean bower, the girl's not interested. And so they'll come in and destroy the bower, or they'll make everything messy. And it's seen that males that have spent years perfecting the structure and display have a much higher chance of being reproductively successful. And so it's just really cool to get to see how unique a structure that individuals will make in order to impress the opposite sex. The next one we have, I kind of ruin it down below, but we have a white spotted pufferfish that makes these intense structures. So here's a funny picture of one that made me laugh, and I hope it made you laugh too. The next one is a little bit better example of what these guys look like. So white spotted pufferfish create these symmetrical circles that can span up to 2 meters or 6.5 feet across. Imagine the amount of intensity and time that goes into creating these sand sculptures. I'm sure if you've ever built a sandcastle on the beach, you just know how impermanent that structure will be. And so these guys will swim and they'll dig out these little caves or these little divots into the sand. They'll also go off and collect softer sand particles as well as seashells and decorate the entire circle. A female will come by and inspect if she likes the symmetry of it, the complexity and the quality of sand. She'll mate with him, and you guessed it, if she doesn't like it, she'll just swim away. Our next one is the peacock jumping spider. This one I selected because this is what my mother requested. She thinks these guys are fascinating and she has every right to. They may look fairly unassuming when we're looking at them head on like this, but they have quite a fun little display to give to us. So they are the peacocks of the little spider world, and they will kind of lift up their abdomen and flash a different display. There's many individuals within this species, so it's quite cool. And then they'll raise up those arms, and those arms have that white tip on the end of it, and those will be little flags that they kind of dance around with. And so they'll perform shaking and hopping, and they'll even send seismic signals down to the female in order to get her attention. Now, they are not so lucky. If they are to approach the female and she is not impressed, she will, as a lot of female spiders do, just eat him. So really it is just do your absolute best, and the worst is she will eat you, not just reject you, unfortunately, for these little guys. We are going to now move on to our outliers. So for this example, I have parrotfish that are on our left-hand side. So you can see on the top are our females, and down at the bottom are our males. So when these fish are born, they predominantly start off as female. And when a dominant male disappears or dies, the largest female will actually go through a transformation and she will become a male. This means the change in hormones, coloration, and reproductive organs. And this sometimes takes several weeks in order to occur, but she'll go through a full body transformation and become the male. Clownfish, on the other hand, all individuals are born as male, and the largest individual in a social group becomes the female. So if the female in that social group is to die or disappear, the dominant male will actually go through the same process and become female. And this is thought to have a greater reproductive success, where larger individuals can produce more eggs. So a little bit of gender change in the animal kingdom. Our next one is going to be our northern Finland ruff. So northern Finland ruffs exist in, you guessed it, Finland, where they mate on these really big bogs. And the way that they have their courtship displays is called lekking, where multiple females will group together and they will just jump really high in the air. There's not a lot of sound that they emit. They just jump really high in the air. And there's several different types of males that are all trying to do courtship. So you have your independent male, which is what we're seeing with this beautiful ruff. That ruff can come in a variety of colors, from that rusty red to a darker brown. And then you have your satellite, which are your subordinate, and they usually have more of a white ruff. The subordinates usually join in these leckings, though the independent typically doesn't allow them to actually mate. They just kind of want them there to make them look better. And then you have your fader. So your fader is actually mimicking the female. So he looks like a female, and he'll sneak into these lucking events and mate with the females while the independent and the satellite are doing their display. This is really uncommon for animals to display female characteristics in order to have copulation. So this is a really fascinating example of different forms of strategies in reproducing. This one can be kind of uncomfortable to look at, so you can close your eyes if you want and just listen. But we're going to be talking about anglerfish. So to our left, we have the female, and to our right, we have the male. And you can guess that the male looks very different. He looks very unassuming and rather unattractive. And so the way that they reproduce is called sexual parasitism. And when you live in these extremely dark environments, visual cues are really not as important to you as a female. And so these guys will swim through the water until they come in contact with a male, or I'm sorry, and the males will swim through the water until they come in contact with a female. And when they do, the males will bite onto her and they will actually attach. And what they do is they release enzymes that fuse their skin, their blood vessels, to the female and cause them to degenerate. They lose their eyes and internal organs, and they essentially become a sperm producing appendage on the female. This doesn't just mean that the female gets one and done. She can have multiple males that are kind of parasitizing off of her, and she'll use them as she pleases for their sperm production. I'm using giraffes here as this example, but you'll find out they're not the only ones that do this. So giraffes partake in same-sex mating more often than they do for heterosexual mating. It's thought that same-sex interactions account for about 94% of mounting incidences. It's thought that this is for reinforcing social bonds as well as establishing dominance. They're not the only ones that do this. If you've had a dog, you've probably seen your dog hump another dog. Dolphins, lions, bighorn sheep do this. Swans will sometimes form long-term bonds, monogamous bonds with same-sex individuals as well. So just really fascinating that it's not always the sexual reproduction drive. The next one that we have is our spotted hyenas. So in these groups, the females are higher ranked. So they are matriarchy status. The female has an enlarged clitoris that acts as a pseudo penis, and she will use this to insert or enforce her dominance on others. Males in these scenarios are actually the lowest ranking individuals, even lower than pups most of the time. And so when a male is trying to court a female, he does have to be very careful and very strategic about how he goes about it. He can be quite easily punished, especially by the more dominant female. So that is about the end of my examples. I just want to say that there are roughly 1.5 million species that have been recorded on Earth. Each one is living in their own remarkable way. I think the real beauty lies in the complexity in which these individuals are able to live, and our ability to keep discovering them, how they solve the challenges of survival and reproduction and connection. Today, we just saw a really close and quick glimpse at the animal world and the diversity of wildlife romance. I hope that you got to learn something exciting, be it that the Amazon Molly doesn't technically need a man to reproduce, or the really close connections that individuals can form for years and years and years, such as our ravens or our macaroni penguins. And I just want to wish you all a happy Valentine's Day, and I hope you get to celebrate it in whichever way feels comfortable for you. That is it.
All right. Thank you, Adrianna. All right. So before we dive into the questions, I'd like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can submit them via the question field in your control panel. Just go to the upper right-hand corner. You can click on those three lines. It will open up all the fields. Go ahead, click on questions and put them in there. So can you give us any other examples of lifelong monogamy?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, now all I can think of is ravens. Gosh, a lot of them are birds. Swans mate for lifelong. I didn't mention this in my PowerPoint. I must have gone over it really quickly in my notes, but prairie voles are one of the main identifiers for monogamy in the animal kingdom. They live really short lives, which is thought to be why they can be so monogamous. Extra pair copulations or cheating does occur, but it's a little bit less common. There's several, I think there's a couple other species of primate, but a lot of these examples are going to be in birds, to be honest.
Would that include eagles?
I believe so. Yeah, I definitely glimpsed over eagles while doing this PowerPoint. Yeah, I think so.
So if a bird has a lifelong monogamy mate and that mate dies, will it choose another mate?
Yeah, definitely they do typically. The biologic function in most animals is reproducing and passing on your genetic information. And so most individuals will find another mate in very rare occurrences, such as that albatross, as I mentioned. They will actually abstain from finding another mate. And we can really anthropomorphize this into, oh, they're just grieving and oh, this and that. The fact is we don't have enough science to really go into why that's happening. And I don't know if we'll honestly ever really be able to fully comprehend the intricate world of species beyond us, just because we can't communicate with them the same way.
Well, thank you for that answer. We do appreciate it. So are there other animals, species that copulate front to front?
I want to say probably a lot of your primates. I think you could also say like a lot of our porpoises. I think that they have to do meshing like this, that front to front, in order for copulation to occur. Though I'll be honest, I didn't really watch a whole lot of videos on how copulation is occurring. So I don't have the best answer for that. I'm sorry.
Not to worry, not to worry. Thank you for taking a stab at it. So is infidelity something that happens in the animal world? And would say a bird be wronged if the partner is unfaithful, for instance? Is that something?
So infidelity, yeah, cheating occurs 100%. To say that and the individual would feel wronged or hurt, I think I can't anthropomorphize it, and so I can't put my human ideas onto it. If I had to guess, I would guess probably not, because that monogamous pair is going to probably continue. It's kind of I it's a hard one to answer. It's not as simple in black and white as humans, because in human world, yes, that is wrong and bad, but it's not. I don't think that feelings are getting hurt. No.
Thanks. It's a very difficult question. We can't know the mind of an animal, I suppose. So so let's talk about the bowerbird for a second. Do they have, what natural blue things would they have access to?
Typically, yeah, right, because a lot of the blue that we think of now is trash. But I think that the idea is blue is a very rare color in nature. There's this idea actually that the blue flowers that we see are actually different colors of purple. And blue in feather pigmentation is also not a thing. Blue in feathers is actually the reflection of light and different refractory ways on how feather structure is formed. So blue is extremely rare. And what they're probably doing is gathering, like I said, petals or feathers that are, I can't think off the top of my head what other really intrinsically blue things that they would have. But with the constant arrival of people nearly everywhere, yeah, they have a lot more trash to kind of sort through. And I'm sure it does help them in their own weird little ways. But I think it would be primarily feathers and flowers.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Well, it looks like that's about the last question that we do have today. So well, I'm going to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us today.
I just hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope when you're watching your birds outside, you wonder a little bit more about what their relationships are like and what their dynamics and social behavior is like. And thanks for tuning in, you guys. It was good to get to give you guys all the information I have.
Well, Adrianna, we appreciate so much you taking the time and sharing this fascinating topic with us. We really do appreciate you being here. And I also like to thank everyone who tuned in and joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NADHAB, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nadhab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nadhab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. So long, everybody. We will see you next time.